Good afternoon, ladies. Welcome. We are studying the Parashat. Our Parashat is Parashat Vayishlah. It's always important to study the Torah not as a merely Jewish history, but we must study the Torah as being instructive. But the Torah is to teach us lessons. The word Torah comes from the Hebrew word moreh. Moreh is a teacher. And the Torah, in all of its Pesukim and Parashiyot, has relevant teachings and lessons for all generations. Contrary to what some people think, that the Torah is an outdated book. On the contrary, the Torah is very current and very relevant. It is the book of the ages. And therefore, when we study it, we try to learn and glean some ideas that we can apply in the present. In Parashat Vayishlah, there's some very, very important messages that are revealed from the proper study of the text. I'd like to make you aware of them this afternoon. But let's review the story. I know you know it already, but review never hurt anybody. Our story picks up when Yaakov Avinu is now going to have the epic confrontation with his brother, Esav. This is his brother that he hasn't seen in 20 years or more, 35 years. And he prepares for the confrontation, the Torah says. And one of the ways he made his preparations was that he prayed. And the Pasuk tells us what he said. He says to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Hatzileni na miyad achi miyad Esav. Save me from the hands of my brother, from the hands of Esav. Now, of course, we see a redundancy over here. Yaakov Avinu, as far as we know, only had one brother. So it would have been suffice for him to say, Hatzileni na miyad achi, or Hatzileni na miyad Esav. Why does he have to be so descriptive? Well, that's really the question of the Zohar HaKadosh. And the Zohar learns a lesson from over here, that when a person prays, you have to pray in the clearest language, and not to leave anything to the imagination. Now, even though, of course, God knows what you intend, it doesn't matter. One of the conditions of prayer is that it's a clear, understandable prayer. So therefore, in Hebrew, the word brother can mean relative. Achi can mean a relative, not necessarily a brother. So if Yaakov Avinu just would have said Hatzileni na miyad achi, it could mean somebody else. It could be Lavan. It could be another relative that he's trying to get safety from. So therefore he has to be clear and say miyad Esav. So there's no doubt. Fine, but the Zohar doesn't answer why he has to use the word miyad twice. If that's the case, he could have said Hatzileni na miyad achi Esav. Miyad achi miyad Esav sounds like from the hands of my brother, from the hands of Esav, sounds like it's two separate prayers. What's the two separate prayers? He wants to be saved from his brother. You want to call him Achi, you want to call him Esav, it's the same guy. Why did Yaakov Avinu have to split it up into two? It's an old question. If you go a little further, the Pasuk writes that when Esav was making his way, actually a few Pesukim prior, the Pasuk writes that Esav had 400 men with him. Vayira Yaakov me'od. Yaakov Avinu was very afraid. Vayetzer lo. Vayetzer lo means he was worried. Why the double language? Vayira, vayetzer. Now Rashi handles this redundancy. Rashi says he was afraid that he might get killed, and he was worried that he might have to kill others. He didn't want to kill anybody, Yaakov. That's what Rashi says. I accept it. But maybe we could say another variation. Why the double language? Let's continue the story for a second. So the pasuk then says that Yaakov Abinu is making his way, and he gets to the river, and he crosses his family over the river, the Yabok River. Yaakov then went back because he forgot something. It wasn't his cell phone. He forgot something else. He wouldn't have went back for his cell phone then. He would have thrown in the river. And when he gets to the other side of the river, he's all alone, it's in the middle of the night. All of a sudden there's an Ish. Now this Ish was not a human, the Ish was an angel. And not any angel, the number one most nefarious angel. And that is the Samech Mem himself. Samech Mem, aka Satan, aka Malach HaMavet, aka Yetzer Hara, which is the most toxic of all the angels met him that night, the Samech Mem we call him. Now his name is of course Samech Mem, then there's an Aleph and a Lamed. We don't like to say his complete name. Every angel in their suffix has the letters Aleph, Lamed, Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, Samech Mem, and also El. And he meets up with him. What does he do? Now you'd expect the angel wants to help Esau find his whatever he lost. No, that's not what he came for. Pasuk says, "Vayavek ish imo." Vayavek. What does it mean? Vayavek. He wrestled. Vayavek. Rashi brings down. When you're wrestling, you raise dust from the ground because everybody's pivoting and your feet are pressing against the ground back and forth. The word for dust in Hebrew is avak. So vayavek, they made it dusty, the place. They brought up dust. They kicked up dust with their struggle. It also could mean vayavek could mean milashon vayehabek. What does vayehabek mean? To hug. Now they weren't hugging each other, but if you ever seen a wrestling match, when you have the two wrestlers in the ring, what do? They lock each other, and it's like they're hugging. So v'yavek, they locked into each other, and each one's trying to push the other one down. So basically, it was a wrestling match. The angel came with intentions to kill Yaakov, and the wrestling match didn't last 10 rounds. It said it lasted till alot hashah, until dawn. It's an all-night affair. Vayar ki lo yachol lo. So he saw that he wasn't able to get him. Yaakov Abinu was able to withstand the Samech Mem, which is incredible. Vayigat bekaf Yericho. Ladies, explain the words. Vayigat. I'd rather you say nothing than say the wrong answer. The way I learned the word vayiga, liga, nogeya. Nogeya means to touch. Vayiga bekaf Yericho. If I'm reading it correctly, vayiga, he reached out and he touched kaf Yericho, his thigh. Vateka kaf Yericho Yaakov, and Yaakov displaced his hip. And then the angel says, okay, that's it, I had enough, send me back. And he changes his name to Israel. No longer are you called Yaakov. Continue. Vayikra Yaakov Shema Makom. So Yaakov now wants to name the place. They were very into that in the older days. Anytime there was an event in the place, they gave the place a name. We can't do that already because all the places have names already. I can't change Brooklyn to, whatever it is, ladies' class on Thursday. I can't change the name. The name already is established. But in those days, these places had no names. So anytime there was a significant event, they could say, okay, now we're going to call the place so-and-so to commemorate the event. So what did Yaakov call the place where the fight was? So he didn't call it Las Vegas, where there's known for wrestling matches. Vayikra Yaakov Shema Makom Peniel. What does it mean, Peniel? Pene'el, face of God, or face of an angel. Because El, we told you, is an angel. He says, Ki ra'iti Elohim panim el panim. I saw the angel face to face, and we went toe to toe, v'tenatzel nafshi, and I got saved. So he called the place, rightfully so, Peniel, the face of God. Vayisrach lo hashemesh, and then the sun rose. Ka'asher avar, and now he's leaving the location. Ladies, what's the name of the place? Peniel, beautiful. But now the Pasuk writes, Ka'asher avar et Penuel. What happened? They changed the name on him. How did overnight become from Peniel to Penuel? And now all of a sudden the Pasuk says, V'hu tzoleya al Yerecho. And now Yaakov was limping. I don't understand. Only when he woke up in the morning he was limping? He wasn't limping the night before? Listen, maybe you'll tell me I don't know too much about exercise. Maybe I should know. But the point is, they tell you don't feel it, that day. You feel it the next day. You wake up Charlie horse. Okay? If that's what you want to answer the text and tell me it was a Charlie horse situation. So that day, the adrenaline, he was all excited. Next morning he woke up, oh my gosh, I can't walk. Fine. If that's the way you want to interpret it, I accept it hesitantly. So anyway, what happens? Because he was limping, we have a Torah law now. This limping of Yaakov is going to affect your diet. Al ken lo yochlu bnei Yisrael et gid hanasher. That's it. No more sirloin steaks for any of us. You can't eat the gid hanasher. Anytime you slaughter an animal, you have to make sure to take out that vein called the gid hanasher, like sciatic. Why? Why do we got it? Why can't we eat it? Ki nagah bekaf yedek Yaakov, because he touched it. I don't understand it. He touched his whole body that night. He was wrestling him with the whole body. He must have got him in his head, and he must have got him on his... Okay, fine. So the part of the body that Yaakov felt some pain was there. So what, to commemorate the pain of Yaakov, so therefore we cannot eat Gid HaNasheh, it begs understanding. It begs understanding. And finally, if we're going to understand this parasha correctly, I'd like to ask you the question that was raised by the great rabbi called Rav Elchanan Wasserman, Hashem Yimkom Damav. Rav Elchanan Wasserman was the star student of the Hafetz Chaim. He was a tremendous Gaon in Torah, in Yirat Shamayim, in Hashkafa. He died, as I said, God should avenge his blood during the Holocaust. He died at the 9th fort in Kavno with his students, and he died al Kiddush Hashem. It's a whole story the way he died. He knew that they were going to kill him and his students the next day, and they studied the whole night the laws of Kiddush Hashem, how to give up your life for God. And he told his students, tomorrow we're going to be sacrifices, human sacrifices, and if we do it the correct way, our sacrifice will be an atonement for the Jews in America. And they went, and he said, make sure you have no bad thoughts, and he prepared them, and they gave their lives up in the most superhuman, noble way. He was nothing short than an angel, Rav Elchanan Wasserman. When the Hafetz Chaim was contemplating to move to Israel, so the students came along and said, how could the rabbi leave us? He says, don't worry, I'm leaving you with Rav Elchanan. That means the Hafetz Chaim put the trust in this Rav Elchanan Wasserman. Hashem Yimkom Damav. He had a yeshiva as well in Baranovich. So he asks $1 million question. It's in his book called Kobetz Ma'amarim of Rav Elchanan Wasserman. He says, "V'sarich lehavin, במה שכתוב ויאבק איש עמו. דהאיש הוא הסמ"ם. דלמה המתין סמ"ם מללחום עד יעקב, שהיה כבר חוט המשולש. היה לו ללחום עם אברהם. Why did the סמ"ם wait to fight until Yaakov? Why didn't he fight against Abraham and against Yitzchak? Was Yaakov the first Sadiq? He wasn't the first Sadiq. Now I have no doubt the Samechmem has no fond feelings towards Abraham or Yitzchak either. I guarantee you that. So Rav Elchanan says, why delay the match? Why did he wait until Yaakov? Why didn't he go after Abraham? If he's going after the tzaddikim, why did he pass up on two great tzaddikim that came before Yaakov? If you know the answer, I didn't know the answer. This is Rav Elchanan's question. And he has a whole arichut over here. Your lucky day, I'm going to read you the full answer inside so you don't miss one of his words. That's the questions that we posed today. So I want to begin unraveling this very important shi'ur. I'm sorry again for those that came for Kabbalah and for esoteric interpretations and gematria. You're not in luck today. Today's your unlucky day. Listen, sometimes I'm in the mood to just explain it rationally, where we can learn a moral of the story. And sometimes I like to say Divrei Torah that you will be able to repeat at the table, instead of those difficult ones that sound nice but they elude you when you leave. This one over here, I have no doubt that you're going to remember it and you'll be able to repeat it. So, to unravel this very important subject, we start with the rabbi called the Bet HaLevi. The great Rabbi Soloveitchik from the dynasty of Brisk. So he comes along and he says, V'yesh lefaresh hakavana. He's explaining miyad achi, miyad Esav. He says because the Esav ba lekrato, when Esav was coming towards Yaakov Abinu, Hevin, he understood delo yimalet mehad mishnei ha'ofanim, that Esav can come in one of two ways. Esav, after all, has two faces. Me and you only have one face. Esav has two faces. Or the Esav yilachem imo. Esav can come as a warrior, as a violent one. V'yirtzeh lehorgo. And then Yaakov Avinu has to be concerned that he'll physically kill him. Or the yitratzeh imo. V'yashuv me'ito. V'yeshiv imo b'shalva be'achba. Or Esav can come with a different, and I call it a different tactic. Where he could come in the name of peace, and he could come in the name of brotherhood and fraternity. Kishnei achim, like two brothers. U'mishnei ha'ofanim halalu nityarei Yaakov. Yaakov was worried. I was going to say equally, but it's not equally. He was worried and concerned about both options. Degam tovato ve'ahavato shel Esav ra'a hayta etzel Yaakov. If Esav comes as a friendly brother and wants to live in peace and have a relationship, that's called the tova of Esav. The tova of Esav is ra'a liYaakov. Why? We'll see now. Ve'al elu shnei ofanim, and it's because of these two faces. Amar katuv vayira Yaakov meod. Yaakov was afraid, vayetzer lo, and he was worried. He was afraid that Esav might come to kill him, and he was worried that Esav might come to be his friend. Now, of course, all of us can understand why he's worried against the violent hands of Esav. After all, he doesn't want to get killed. But why should he be concerned if Esav is going to come with brotherly love? So he says, because we know that even the love of Esav has consequences, and those consequences are dire. Rav Elchanan Wasserman, in this same Sefer, makes a shocking statement. He said, who had it better off? The Jews in Germany or the Jews in Russia? The way he says it, the Jews under Hitler or the Jews under Stalin? Now my answer, my knee-jerk answer would be, once you hear the word Hitler, it can't be good. It's got to be the Jews under Stalin had it better than the Jews under Hitler. But Rav Elchanan Wasserman says no. The Jews under Hitler, they died. Worse than died. They were tortured. It was a butchering. It was the terrible thing. We know that, but it was physical. It was a physical death, and then they went to Olam Haba. Whereas in Stalinist Russia, although they weren't coming after our bodies, they weren't trying to kill us, but they tried to assimilate us, and they took away our God, and therefore they were going after our eternity. So Rav Elchanan Wasserman sees in Hitler one type of Esav, and in Stalin another type of Esav. If I could make it a little clearer, if you remember when Napoleon Bonaparte came into Eastern Europe and took over Europe, there were many of the rabbis that were praying for his demise. Why would you want to pray for his demise? Napoleon Bonaparte came with egalite, liberté, and fraternité. He came to free everybody. He came to emancipate everybody. Everybody's equal. Compare that to where the Jews were living under the Tsar of Russia, Nikolai, and he was a tyrant. So why would they rather to have the tyrant Nikolai instead of the peaceman in Bonaparte? And Rabbi Zalman explained that under Nikolai, our danger is physical. Under Bonaparte, now that we're all equal and we could rub elbows with the Gentiles and we'll have freedom of access and be part of society, now I'm worried that that friendly face of the fraternity of Bonaparte will cause the Jews to enter a world that doesn't belong to them, and it'll lead to assimilation. The smile of Esav is just as dangerous, if not more, than the grimace of Esav. They both have dangers. One is physical, one is spiritual. I remind you what the Tsar of Russia wrote a letter to his nephew, Franz Joseph, the Premier of Austria. And he said to my dear nephew, why do you afford Jews freedoms and liberties and give them all rights? Wouldn't it be more prudent to treat them like I do in my domain, with a harsh fist and with the sword? Franz Joseph answers to my dear uncle, the Tsar of Russia, you kill your Jews your way, I'll kill them my way. Which means we both have the same end game. We both want to kill them. One is to kill them physically, and one is to kill them spiritually. Both are dangerous. And says the Bet Levi, that's why Yaakov was praying for both situations. Hatzileni na miyad achi. Save me from the guy that comes to me as a brother. Miyad Esav. And then save me from the one that comes to me as a tyrant. Save me from the brotherly Esav, brotherly brother, and save me from the Esav, the bloodthirsty one. And I will bring a proof that Yaakov was worried about the first. He was worried about Ahi more than Esav, because that's what he mentioned first. He was more worried about the danger of spiritual assimilation than he was about his physical body. Now, maybe you'll say to yourself, well, Yaakov, it's in your brain. Esav doesn't want to be your friend. Why do you think Esav wants to assimilate you? He wants to kill you. That's the Esav that we know. Well, let's go to the story now. And let's see what happened when Esav ultimately comes. So the pasuk says, "Vayisa Yaakov enav, vayar v'ine Esav ba v'imo 400 ish." 400 people coming. It's going to be a war. 400 soldiers. We didn't need 400 soldiers for the red carpet, to roll out the red carpet. Vayarotz Esav likrato. Esav comes to greet him. Vayhabekehu. He hugs him. A lot of hugging by Yaakov in this week's parasha. Vayipol al sabarav, vayishakehu. What does it mean, vayishakehu? He kissed him. Now, you don't have a book in front of you, but in my book, vayishakehu, he kissed him, there's dots on it. There's dots on it, and these dots have to mean something. Rashi actually says that it's coming to say, vayishakehu could mean like vayishakehu. Instead of he kissed him, he tried to bite him. Make up your mind. Did he try to kiss him, or did he try to bite him? So the Midrash says, initially he tried to bite him, but Yaakov's neck turned into marble. So the teeth of Esav fell out. Good for him. And now what? After he couldn't bite him, so he decided to kiss him. Ladies, according to the Bet Levi, this is tactics. These are two types of kisses. Both are considered the kiss of death. Once he tried to bite him to kill him physically, and when he couldn't kill him physically, then he decided to kiss him. Kiss him, which means I'll kill him in a different way. Like they say in America, I'll kill him with kindness. Once I could become friendly with Yaakov and his family, then I could start teaching them my corrupt values. Then I could start teaching them my culture. And before you know it, they'll be assimilated, they'll forget Torah, they'll forget mitzvot, and we'll be one people. And don't think that that's an exaggeration, because what does the pasuk say? That after they start meeting each other and they start introducing themselves, this is my wives, the pasuk actually says, Yaakov had all his family with him, his wives and his children. Vayisa et einav, so Esav lifts his eyes. And what does he see? Vayar et hanashim. First thing he sees is the ladies. That's the first thing Esav sees. That's very telling about Esav. Anyway, the pasuk says that Yaakov gave him some gifts. Esav hesitantly accepts the gifts, but then he takes them. And then Esav says what's really in his heart. Vayomer nis'a v'nelecha. Let's travel together. Oh, this is what he was worried about. What do you mean, let's travel together? Since when does Esav ever want to travel with Yaakov? Because now he has a plan. If I can't kill him, tried to bite his neck off, that didn't work. So he says, I'm going to go to plan 2. And this is what Yaakov was worried about. So it says, let's go travel together. So what did Yaakov right away say? Makes an excuse. You know, little kids, they can't walk that fast. I don't want to slow you down. A lot of animals. Udfakum yom ehad, if we're going to rush them to go at your pace, vametu, they all die. So he says, hey, why don't you go ahead? Ya'avorna adoni lifnei avdo. You know, ladies first. You go first. Va'ani itnahala le'iti, and I'll catch up. I'm going to go my own pace. Wow, these two Pesachim over here sound like social graces. No, please join me. No, thank you. No, this, by the way, might be the Jewish people might have found themselves in the biggest danger in these two Pesukim. Esav over here is insisting, no travel. And if Yaakov Abinu buckles and travels, there's no Jewish people. So when he cordially and respectfully says, no, thank you, what does Esav then say? I have another plan. Vayomer Esav, Atzigana imecham min ha'am asher iti. you know what? If we can't travel together, let me give you some security from my people and they'll travel with you. Esav has a different plan now. At least he could plant in the camp of Yaakov some of his people, some of his professors from the college. He'll put some of his, some of his educators, some of his, mentors, and they'll infiltrate. Some of his writers, some of his poets, some of his musicians. Put some of those guys in Yaakov's camp. And then what does Yaakov say? Why, Esav? Why? He refuses that also. No, thank you. Keep your professors in the colleges. Keep your music. Keep your books. Keep all that stuff. No, thank you. I don't want any free gifts. And then the pasuk says, "Vayashov bayom ha'u Esav ledarko se'ira." Esav went back to Seir. Thank God. And the pasuk comes along and says, "V'Yaakov nasa sukota." Esav goes his way, and Yaakov goes his way. And this, the Torah is telling us that Yaakov Abinu set up the future of Jewish history. That Jews always have to be concerned about both situations. We have to be concerned about Esav, the tyrant, and we have to be worried about Esav, the brother. Those two faces will always exist. I remind you, in the post-Holocaust era, which we're living in now, which is America, which is clearly not Germany in 1937, America, they smile at us, they give us freedom. And during this time of freedom of religion and freedom of speech and all the other freedoms that we've gotten used to, the assimilation rate in America is staggering, and the statistics have said in the post-Holocaust era, over 6 million Jews have assimilated. So you could argue which Holocaust was worse. The physical Holocaust, and they go to Olam Haba and they still have a soul, or the spiritual Holocaust of the brotherly Esav. Now, there is no museum commemorating this silent Holocaust that I just talked about. Yes, they have the museums to remember the Holocaust of the physical, but for whatever reason, it is not well known and not well documented, the silent Holocaust that takes place and is taking place. The only difference is, in the Holocaust, the Jews walked into the gas chambers with a Nazi and a gun pressed to their back. But in this situation in America, the Jew walks in by himself. He walks in willingly. He doesn't need anybody to force him from behind. And I will tell you what the Hatam Sofer says immediately. So you see, ladies, it's very important you know that. There's two faces of Esav, and they're both dangerous. So if you think because you're living in America that we're not in danger, I will argue this afternoon that we are in great danger. And this is another form of anti-Semitism. It's anti-Semitism where they're trying to kiss us to death. It's anti-Semitism with a smile and a bouquet of flowers. But the results are just as dire and just as serious, if not more. Now let's go back. Let's go back to the story of Yaakov and the angel. Well, Yaakov and the angel, who's the angel? The angel is the Samech Mem, as I told you. He's the angel of Esav. So whatever Esav does, where does he learn it from? His angel. The angel is his guide. Every nation of the world has a malach that guides them. Except us. We belong to God. God guides us. But all the rest of the nations of the world are under the auspices of malachim, sarim they're called. So my question was as follows. Did the angel use both tactics? Yes. Oh, you say, yeah, beautiful. I'd love to know how. Because all I see in my text is, Vayivater Yaakov levado, Yaakov is alone, Vayavik ish imo. He wrestled him the whole night. He wrestled. He wrestled to kill him. All I see in the text over here is he wrestled, and then as he's wrestling, he gives him a blow to the thigh. I don't see any brotherly love over here by the angel of Esav. I see that the angel of Esav used one of the two tactics. But it can't be, because if Esav uses both tactics, it must be in the root. And now I will prove it to you that he did use both tactics. You remember I asked you, what does Vayavek mean? And you told me wrestle, to fight, with dust and smoke all over the place. Vayavek, they're hugging each other to kill each other. And then what happens? Vayar ki lo yachol lo. He saw that wrestling is not going to work. So what did he do? He stopped wrestling. Vayiga. What does vayiga mean? He touched. You know when you touch? When you want to make nice. When you want to make nice. He came along and said, Yaakov, I hurt you, I'm sorry. Vayiga. Let me make nice. Let me kiss the boo-boo, like we used to tell our kids. Vayiga. Doesn't say vayakeh. If he's trying to break his leg, shouldn't say vayakeh, vayach. Vayiga means he touched. At this point, I will argue today, Vayiga, he changed gears, the malach. And guess what? When the angel was wrestling him and trying to kill him, Yaakov said, as long as they're trying to kill us, the Jews will survive. But once they start to make nice to us, Vayiga, now he felt the damage. Only Vayiga. And it should be the opposite. It should be when they were wrestling, he was all hurt up. Vayiga, he started to feel better. But the pasuk says the opposite. When they were wrestling, Yaakov feels nothing. Only Vayar ki lo yachol lo. When the angel saw that he can't kill him, then Vayiga, let me just touch him. Let me make nice. V'kaf yerecho. And the pasuk says, oh, v'teka kaf yerech. And all of a sudden, the yerech became dislocated. What does the yerech represent? The children, because that's where the children come from, the yerech. And therefore Yaakov said, wow, if they're going to make nice to us, our children are in danger. The children are going to fall for the culture and for the college and for all the things that they're going to put out there, the internet and all the different things that are in the literature, whatever it is out there today. Yaakov means that's what I'm worried, when they touch us, when they make nice to us. But Tiga. Now watch what happens. The fight is over. So Yaakov Avinu wakes up that night. Vayikra Yaakov Shem Yaakov Peniel. He names the place Peniel, face of God. Rightfully so. Ki ra'iti Elohim panim el panim. I saw an angel face to face. Vatinatzel nafshi. Listen to what he's saying. What does vatinatzel nafshi mean? Shouldn't it say my body was saved? It says my soul was saved. Vatinatzel nafshi. What I'm going to tell you now is as follows. He says, when I was fighting with him the night that we were wrestling, the only thing that was in danger was my physical body. When the Goyim are going to come after us like Esav and like the angel that's wrestling, it's not comfortable. But vatinatzel nafshi. The soul will be saved. SOS, save our souls. Vatinatzel nafshi. If they kill our bodies, but the soul is intact. So Yaakov says, Peniel. It's the face of God. That means when they come after us physically, we still see the face of God. The face of God is in front of us. Peniel. However, Vayizrach lo Hashemesh, the sun came up. You know what that represents? When the sun of exile starts to shine on us. And now they're not treating us like an enemy. Now it's sun. Now it's bright. That's a different form. Vayizrach lo Hashemesh. Now what is the name of the place? Kasher Avad et Penuel. Penuel means to turn away from God. When they're violently murdering Jews, the Jew turns to God and says, Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, and gives his life. He dies al Kiddush Hashem. That's Pene'el. But Vayizra'lo Hashemesh, when the Goy shines his light of freedom on us, and the Jew now is invited to attend and to be part of all of the events of society, they take down the signs, no dogs and Jews allowed. Then it says, the new name of the town is not Pene'el, because the Jew doesn't see the face of God. It's Penu'el. Penu'el means to turn away from God. And then the Pasuk says, Vehut Soleya al Yericho. Now Yaakov feels the damage. He didn't feel it before, because you don't feel the damage when it's only physical. But when it was a spiritual damage, now Vehut Soleya al Yericho. Now Yaakov walks away limping. Now I tell you what the Hatam Sofer said. Hatam Sofer said the famous mashal. The wager that the sun and the wind made. Ladies, it's a mashal. One time there was a fellow walking in the street and he was wearing a fur coat. And the sun wagered with the wind. Who could get the fellow to remove his coat? So the wind said, of course I can, I'll blow it off him. The sun said, okay, fine, I think I can do it, but you go first. So the wind came and started to violently blow. A strong gale wind. And what was happening is the more the wind blew, the tighter the fellow held on to the coat. It only caused him to hold on to the coat with a tighter grip. And then the sun said, now it's my chance. And he came out on a beautiful summer day. Not a cloud in the sky, no wind. Bright sun, 95 degrees. And the fellow took off the coat by himself. Said the Hatam Sofer, when Esav comes against us like a wind and like a tornado, Klal Yisrael holds on to God. They hold on to the coat more. They turn to HaKadosh Baruch Hu in teshuvah. But by Yisrach lo Hashemesh, when the sun comes out, and now everything's kind, everything's fine, the Jew takes off the coat himself. What the wind, what the violent Esav was not able to accomplish, the brotherly Esav accomplished. And how? By Yisrach lo Hashemesh. Then already it's not Peniel, it becomes Penu'el. Vehut Soleya al Yericho. Now you feel the damage. And therefore, you know how we're supposed to remember this? Al ken lo yochlu bnei Yisrael et gid hanasher. Don't eat the gid hanasher. Why? Because the gid hanasher represents not the violent Esav, not the v'ya'avek Esav, not the Esav that was wrestling, but the Esav that was vayiga. The Esav that was making nice. The nice Esav touches Kaf Yerech Yaakov. Torah says don't eat the gid hanasher. Because every time you eat a piece of meat and you have to take away the gid, you'll be reminded. Because the violent Esav you don't need to be reminded of. That we all know. But it's the other guy you need to remember. The gid hanasher reminds you of that. And if anybody knows what the word hanasher means, what does hanasher mean? Simply means the vein that moved. Because when Yaakov Abinu got hit, it moved. But he didn't get hit, he got touched. There was one of the grandchildren of Yaakov that has a name similar to Hanasher. Very good, good guess. Well, it's not Naphtali, so it has to be Menashe. What does Menashe mean? Yosef called Menashe Menashe, it says, because I was in Egypt, I was estranged from my family, and Baruch Hashem, you made me forget. You made me forget. Nashani Elohim, Nashani is to forget. In Arabic also, it means to forget. So Gid Hanasheh means the Gid of forgetting. Because what causes us to forget God? The Gid Hanasheh, that Vayiga, when we get touched, when they take their magic wand, the culture, and they touch us, and they come along and say, abracadabra, join us, that magic touch of the culture and the society, that ultimately brings us to forgetting God. Gid Hanasheh. And I don't have to prove my point. Just look at the kids, look at the society today, and I rest my case. And now we get to the last question that we asked. The last question was Rav Elchannon's question. Why did he wait for Yaakov? Why didn't he go after Abraham and Yitzhak? Well, I have the sefer in front of me. I'd like to read it. B'nei Amru Razal, to Yerushalmi. Hagiga, Perek Aleph Halacha Zayin. Viter HaKadosh Baruch Hu al avon avodah zara Gilui Arayot v'shfichut damim. During the times of the destruction of the temple, God forewent, He foregoed the three cardinal crimes: idolatry, immorality, and bloodshed, murder. Viter means he's a mevater. He let it slide. Velo viter alavon bitul Torah. But there was another sin they were committing. They weren't learning like they were supposed to. It's called bitul Torah. They were wasting their time. Shne'emar, as the pasuk says in Yirmiyah, al ozbam et torati, because they left my Torah. Halvai oti azvu. God says, I wouldn't be so upset if they left me, but Torati shamaru, but they should study Torah. Now this is very difficult. I understand, ladies, it's important to learn. But are you telling me that bitul Torah is worse than murder? Bitul Torah is worse than immorality, is worse than avodah zarah? How can it be? How can it be that God says, the three, we'll deal with it, it's okay. But bitul Torah, that's it. You drew a line. We can't close our eyes anymore. So Rav Elchanan wants to understand this Gemara. How can bitul Torah be a bigger crime than the three federal crimes, the three cardinal crimes? You have a minute for his answer? No, I know that I was late. So he gives a mashal. He says, Ner'eh, when you have two sides that are fighting, that are warring with each other, even if one side wins one of the battles, we know that war is made up of many battles. And just because you lost the battle does not mean you lost the war. If I can trivialize it in boxing, for example. I know it doesn't look like you ladies are big boxing fans, but in boxing, they have rounds. And even though if the boxer loses round one, does not mean that he loses the bout. He doesn't lose the match. So the same thing in war. This city went to this side does not mean that the war is over. He says, the efshar, because it's possible, shehayom yinatzayach zeh umahar yinatzayach havero. Today, this side was victorious, and tomorrow the other side could be victorious. That's the way war goes. Aval means however. If one of the sides is able to take all the ammunition away from his opponent, and now his opponent is left without any defense. Ma bazen nigmera milchama. In that case, the war is over. The war can only be fought if the sides are still having weapons. But once there's no more weapons, that side automatically concedes and loses. Because one thing is for certain, you can't fight a war without a weapon. Now let's go to the real war that we came to talk about. The war that we have against the inclination, the evil inclination. That's a war. Asher HaKadosh Baruch Hu Eid, God testified, Barati Yetzer Hara, he's your enemy. Now I cannot put you in a war with an enemy unless I give you ammunition to fight him. And what's the only ammunition that can fight the Yetzer Hara? Torah study. God says that. Barati Yetzer Hara, Barati lo Torah tevalim. And I created the antidote. I don't like the word antidote because antidote sounds like you're in a doctor's office. This is not an antidote. This is a weapon. You're on a battlefield. There's a war taking place. And the Yitzhak has 400 men with him, like Esav. And that means 400 different ways to influence. And God says, don't worry, you could beat him. As long as you have Torah. Vishum klezayin. No other weapon. Acher lo yitzlach neged hayetzer hara rak limud haTorah. If you want to know what's going to save your children against the Yetzer Hara of American culture, there's only one solution: study of Torah. Everything else is synthetic. Everything else is fake. It's like going to a war with a water gun, with a pea shooter. Now listen to what he says. When the Jewish people are batel, when they don't study Torah, avdu akli zayin shelahem. Ve'en lahem b'ma lilchom im hayetzer. They have nothing with the fight. Which means, if they commit a sin, committing a sin of gilui arayot, even avodah zarah, is losing a battle. So you lost, you fell. But as long as you still have Torah, you can win the war. But once you give up Torah, the war is lost. And that's what God said. I could forgive them for making sins. You made a sin, it's fine, but as long as they still have the Torah, they can win the war. But once they gave up and they put their weapons down, God says that is clear defeat. And therefore God said, I wish they would leave me. Just study Torah and the light of the Torah will bring them back. Let them just study Torah. I once went to the Mashgiach across the street, Rabbi Erlanger, may live and be well. I had asked them, there were some fellows many years, 20, 30 years ago, that I was trying to influence them. And they started to come to one of my classes. I was teaching them Talmud. And then I overheard them that right after the Talmud class, they go and they play poker. So I felt very uneasy with that. What am I teaching these? These are a bunch of gamblers. But so much so that straight from the class, how much influence could I have on them? They're going straight from the class to go now play cards, gamble money, steal money from each other. So I told the mashgiach, I'm uncomfortable. He says, just let the Torah do its magic. Just teach them Torah. The light of the Torah will bring them back. And sure enough, many of those guys today are studying Kabbalah. Well, 30 years later. And they're not going to poker after Kabbalah either. Which means, let the Torah do its magic. Torah has a tremendous influence. But once already you give up Torah, it's over. Says Rav Elchanan, Da'al yedei Torah, limud HaTorah, yit'oreru l'tshuvah. It'll arouse them to make the shuvah. Like it says, Ma'or sheba mahzira lemutav. The light of Torah will bring them back to the straight and narrow path. V'al ken, and that's why hayetzer hara mitchazek u'mitametz lebatel bilimud Torah yoter mikol hamitzvot. That's why the biggest yetzer hara is to stop people from learning. The yetzer hara doesn't have a problem if you do chesed. The yetzer hara doesn't have a problem if you pray. Do all the good deeds in the world, just don't learn. He quotes from the Hafetz Chaim. He says, "Shamati mepeh kadosh," from the holy mouth of the Hafetz Chaim. Now he writes it in Yiddish. Dam Yetzer hara nit Yid zal fasten und wenn a ganzen Tag, aber nit learning. He says the Yetzer hara doesn't care. Let a person fast all day. Let him pray all day. Just what? Don't learn. That's Hafetz Chaim. Yetzer doesn't care. Do all the mitzvot in the world. Imagine fasting all day long and praying all day long. And the Hafetz Chaim says the Yetzer is very happy. You can do it all day long. Just don't learn, because he knows that's the weapon. Learning. So then he says, and this is his answer, V'yadua ki Avraham Abinu haya amud hachesed. Avraham represented chesed. Chesed's great, but it's not Torah. The Yetzer hara says, good, chesed, if that's how you're going to build a nation just on chesed, it's easy. Even the conservative and the reform do chesed. V'yitzchak haya amud avodah. Yitzchak prays. He's avodah. Guess what? There's reform temples and conservative temples. It can't hold the Jewish people just praying all day long. So the Yetzer hara, the Satan, had no problem with Avraham and Yitzchak. V'Yaakov haya amud Torah. Yaakov represents Torah. V'Yaakov ishtam yoshevu alim. He learned for 77 uninterrupted years. And that, the Satan said, he's the trouble over here, because he's got the weapon. If he delivers the Torah to his children, it's over. And that fight goes on for the generations. That the Yetzer hara fights the Bnei Torah. He tries to break the yeshiva. He tries to break the learning. Because he knows that that's where the secret of Klal Yisrael existence is. Well, Rav Elchanan says, good news, he wasn't able to get Yaakov, which is a sign to us the Torah will always exist. But he got him in the leg. Rav Elchanan says, what does it mean he got him in the leg? So he offers two interpretations. One interpretation is the legs are the supporters of Torah. And he was able to put a poison in the support system of Torah. He said, if I can't get the guys to stop learning, but at least I'll take away their funding. And that's why, says Rav Elchanan, you could collect for anything, but the hardest thing to collect for is for Torah. We have members, we tell them we're collecting for making a wedding for a poor widow or poor orphan, which is a great thing, of course. Yes, Rabbi, you have it. We're collecting for kolel. I don't give to kolel. I don't do kolel. I only give to hospitals. Which is very nice. But for whatever reason, Torah, we have the hardest time to collect, because people don't understand. The guy's reading Aramaic all day long. You have to pay them, let them go to work. Let them get a job. What am I paying for? If somebody has that attitude, we have a kolel in the shul. Every night they learn Torah at midnight. Kolel Hatzot. They learn from midnight to the morning. I go sometimes to collect money. I say, well, we don't give to this. I tell them, Refuah Shelema. Tell me Refuah Shelema. I said, you're still limping from the fight of Esav. He got you. The angel got you. It's a shame. He didn't get me. I'm learning. He got you. You're the supporter. You're limping still. Go put a bandage on your leg. And then he comes along and says, the last thing what the legs represent. The Satan said, I might not be able to get Yaakov, but I'll go after his children. And that's Rav Elchanan's Lashon over here. He says, V'yesh od pirush. Yerich Yaakov, elu tinokot shel bet Rabbans, the kids. They come out of the loins of the person. Sheolech le'avot tinokot. the Satan goes to the parents of the kids. What are you sending your kids to yeshiva for? They can go to public school. It's free. Although you get what you pay for, but it's still free. What do you got to pay all that tuition for? Make you broke. And the yeshiva's not teaching them anything anyway. And all of a sudden there's a seduction of the Yetzer Hara to the parents to send their kids not to the yeshivas. And that's happening as well today. And you know where it's happening? That even the parents that send them to the yeshivas, when they graduate, they send them to college. You know what Rav Elchanan's opinion about the colleges are? And he wasn't talking about today's colleges. Today's colleges, I think we could all agree, are filled with corruption and the worst values and ideals. The lowliness of the country begins on the campus of the college. It begins in the academia. And then it trickles down to the street. You know what Rav Elchanan said, and I'll leave you with this? The Gemara says, we have an obligation to teach our children a trade. You must teach your children a trade to make parnasah. It's an obligation. It's one of the 5 obligations that a father has to his son. You must teach him a trade. That's where college enters. You know what the other obligation is? You must circumcise your son. Circumcise and teach him a trade. There's no Gemara anywhere that says that teaching a trade is more important than circumcision. Correct? For sure, we agree with that. It's not more important. And we have a law that says, if God forbid, somebody had a child and he died as a result of the circumcision, we don't circumcise the next child. And therefore he said, if somebody died spiritually by going to a college to learn a trade, then we don't do it to the next child. It's not going to be better than Brit Milah. Just like we forego Brit Milah, where it led to death, we have to forego even that if it leads to spiritual death. That was Rav Elchanan's language. Today, Baruch Hashem, we have options. Today, there's kosher ways to teach our children how to make trade. There's kosher ways to teach them how to make parnasah. But just to go blindly and think that that's an option, that is already a result of the Satan's blow to Yaakov. And therefore I say, is Parashat Vayishlah relevant? For all those that think that, it's a storybook of what happened yesteryear. Absolutely not. The Torah is tomorrow's newspaper. The Havdil, of course. And the lesson is very clear. Beware of the 2 faces of Esav. The more damage is not when he's v'ya'avik. The bigger damage is when he's v'yiga. That's when the Gid and Nasher feels the pain. Not at night when they're treating us like a violent man, but when the sun shines in the morning, then the Jew takes off his coat on his own, like the Hatam Sofer said. And this is true up until today. And the only solution is Torah, the study of Torah. To the credit of you great ladies, you're not even obligated to study Torah on the same level as the men, and nonetheless you make it here to this shi'ur on a weekly basis. And we must continue the study, and we must perpetuate it to our children. The Pasuk said, Hakol kol Yaakov, vayadayim yedei Esav. The voice is the voice of Yaakov, and the hands are the hands of Esav. So the rabbis say, it really means when the voice of Yaakov resonates, the hands of Esav are paralyzed. But it doesn't say that in the Pasuk. It says, Hakol kol Yaakov, vayadayim yaseh Esav, which sounds like that when the voice of Yaakov is resonating, that's when the hands of Esav are manifest. And I want to explain it because when the Chesed of Abraham was around, ena yadayim yedei Esav. And when the Avodah of Yitzchak was around, ena yadayim yedei Esav. But once Hakol kol Yaakov, now hayadayim yedei Esav. Now Esav came to fight because he knows that's a weapon. And that's the only weapon that can neutralize him. So we should be zocher to recommit ourselves to the study of Torah. And as a result of that, Borei Olam will rebuild the third Bet HaMikdash. Amen.